Hey everyone, this is S.M. Pratt, and a lot of people are asking me right now, is vintage sealed product in a bubble? For those with no attention span, the quick, easy answer is no, it's not. I don't actually think it's possible to sustain inorganic bubble activity within sealed product. I'd even stretch that to Pokemon at large or collectibles at large. I think it's very difficult to sustain inorganic activity within hobbies because you actually have genuine limitation. That's the largest aspect. Is this product is extremely limited. Also, it requires a certain amount of knowledge. It's very difficult to be ignorant and simultaneously engaged in hobbies. So therefore, I think the markets self-regulate because they are moving quickly and they are also transparent. So we've talked about bubbles before. I think this discussion about sealed product is natural because you're seeing somewhat of a meteoric rise for certain sealed product items like Sky Ridge, Legendary Collection. Basically, the scarcer sets and/or popular sets, they are seeing this meteoric uptick. You see it with individual cards, trophy cards, Charizards, first edition box. Don't even name a Pokemon card. Black Lotuses, Gretzky rookies, Tom Brady card. Basically that part there, that category, that very rare category, experiences this meteoric rise. In all collectibles. And I think that's a good starting point because when people see that rise, that's usually when the alarmist mentality comes in of, oh, bubble, 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 like the little salmon from SpongeBob starts saying, just perking up and saying bubble. And I think it's a good understanding between collectibles and even something like a growth stock is that the reasons for growth aren't parallel. If you see even a growth stock like let's say an Amazon, Tesla, if you really want to roll the dice, something that has that type of rise, I think would yes, be speculative because it's like, oh, where'd that growth come from? Because that's based on a company's output and what they're producing. Or with a collectible, it's based on its availability and demand. And when you're talking about these items that have a handful of copies, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 50, even 100 copies, it's like god tier rarity. When you're talking about that pool of availability, it only takes an intersection of a few people to just make that product rise. And you see it over and over and over again. It's nothing new. It's been happening for decades now, in modern collectibles. So when people see that growth, like we are in this microcosm of sealed product, I think a lot of people, they do that alarmist, oh, is it bubble? Should I get out all the Squirtle cards and start blowing bubbles? In my opinion, I don't think it's possible to really sustain inorganic activity, and here's why. If you look at Unlisted Leaf, I'm going to be in danger here of partially defending the king of hype channels. But we know Unlisted Leaf likes just talking about anything and saying every single energy card and every single Beanie Baby is the newest hot thing to buy. However, if you look at the 2016 Festa, I think he got a little bit too much heat for that because it didn't actually create a bubble. What it did is it put focus on something that had legs to it. Did he create awareness and make people, aware of something? I think before it naturally grew that way, naturally, whatever that means. Perhaps, yeah, perhaps he did. However, if you examine that 2016 Festa card, it actually was the rarest Festa release. It only had 2 releases rather than the 4 locations of the previous Festa tournaments. Also, it had the most popular artwork. It had all 4 of the starters, 20th anniversary. It's got those 2 variables there. Some rarity to it, and popularity, rarity and demand, the main 2 variables. So that is why it's stuck, is because it had organic elements to it that allowed it to stick. Now, another example, sticking with the Unlisted Leaf screaming hype from the mountain nonstop, he talked about Red's Pikachu, and what happened? Absolutely nothing. Zero market effect. Talked about the hot new energy card that has a nice Ken Sugimori artwork on it with Red and Pikachu, and there was no movement whatsoever. Why? Because it wasn't actually organically rare. Sure, I think it does have a nice artwork. I think most people would agree that, yeah, it looks good. However, it's extremely common. So therefore, a great example of how hype can only do so much. And more specifically, it's temporary. The only time, when people say hype, what they really mean is focus. Someone put focus on this. Awareness. Someone made me aware of this card. That's really what hype is at the end of the day. Because there's so many cards in the hobby that it's impossible to see them all at once. It's like, unless you're entering the matrix, it's just impossible to see everything. Even for me, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this card. That's why when I talk about overrated and underrated, a lot of it is, oh yeah, I forgot about this one, and wow, it's sitting at this value that it's been at for X amount of time. It has all these other variables, so I think it's a bit underrated, or it might be a little overrated. But at the end of the day, that's all hype really means. It's just awareness. Now, if hype sticks, it's probably because there's some organic interest. So Sticking to this whole bubble idea, I think a bubble we can all agree on was the Gold Star bubble in like 2014, around there. And again, it didn't last long. And it's a mixture of variables. First of all, Gold Stars are some of the best set cards ever released, bar none. I don't have even a huge position on them. It's just objectively the truth. They are beautiful cards, some of the most difficult cards to pull from a pack, shining cards. You can just stop it there. And also, it was during a scarce era. You don't have a ton of product out there, like you would 3 years later, or even maybe like 4 years back. It was in that scarcity low point. So you have that organic aspect again. And when you had the inorganic hype, or whatever you want to call it, the bubble that everyone agreed upon, what happened? The market self-regulated. And this is just how all markets are. And I think a good way to take a step out for people who are still gung-ho and they're like, no, it's a bubble. It's all bubble. It's going to pop. It's all going to come down. If you take a step out and look at the housing market had this type of inorganic activity for years. Years. I would say almost a decade. You had so many subprime mortgages. You had so many you had loans that people gave out that weren't even based on what you made. It was unbelievable. It's just absolutely ridiculous. It's almost like a video game. It's almost like you just like hacked a video game in real life to get a loan. I mean, it was insane how just laid back they were about, financing people because the market was booming. But this was a long process. It was years on years on years. But more importantly, it had those two variables of massive ignorance and not an organic demand. I remember there were neighborhoods in my area that within 2 years, one house sold 4 times and it wasn't really occupied. That's one of those red flags. So you had this inorganic demand, plus you can build homes. I felt like I was taking crazy pills even as a kid or when I was younger, like in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I was like, wait, can't people just build homes? Like, as long as there's land, you can just build a home. It's like, I can't just create more Pikachu illustrators. I can't just create more Honus Wagners. Like, it's a finite amount. So both of these are high risk scenarios. The things that are low risk in collectibles, some type of limitation, organic demand, both of those were the opposite. Unlimited, as much as you can build for the supply, and then inorganic demand where people are just flipping homes they aren't even living in, massive red flag. So I think another thing to talk about with bubbles and collectibles is that, while sticking to this housing market idea, things are much more, I would say things are much faster in collectibles and also much more transparent. Even auctions where we suspect someone's shill bidding, you have people within hours that like deduce everything, look at all the bidders, look at all the context, look at all the past auctions, and they give you a very concise answer. Where if you look at some of the neighborhoods that were being bought out, back in the housing bubble, it was like, oh, wait, this person, John Doe, who has an office over here, but they're actually based out of Ireland and then owned by, some Middle Eastern holding company. You have no idea who's doing what and who owns what. But with Pokemon and collectibles, there's a lot of transparency. Even with some of the stuff that's going on right now with some of the graders and some of the auction houses, it's very transparent. It's very fast. The information's out there immediately. So therefore, again, even if you're still holding on, you're like, no, there's got to be a bubble. There's got to be something going on. Even if there genuinely is inorganic activity, things are so fast and transparent. It gets spotted and it gets analyzed and it gets light shed on it. Where again, if you look at the housing market, who knows who owns those neighborhoods, those homes, those developments? You have no idea. You have no idea what company that is that's stationed over here, that has an office over here, that has a worker over here. You have no idea who it is at the end of the day. So I think in a nutshell, in a very elaborate, long-winded nutshell, that is why I believe that collectible markets are very difficult to sustain inorganic activity. I don't doubt inorganic activity exists. If anything, I certainly talk about it. I talked about it before with Skyridge. I was like, yeah, I think Skyridge has a lot of hype right now. Does that mean it's naturally going to drop at some point? If there's not a supply, a significant amount of supply to drive that price down, I don't see it happening. And I think another thing that I want to close with is I try to contextualize this, but it's very hard because I think people misinterpret it as like flexing, like, oh, talk about the whales and the money or whatever. And that's not the intention. When I talk about that aspect, I'm trying to highlight that within collectibles, if you look at the statistic, there's 11 million millionaires in the US. When you have an item, again, 10 copies, 50 copies, 100 copies, God tier rarity. That's 100. Let's just say it's 100. Let's go as high as we can. 100 copies of something. Okay. I mean, I think people are just severely ignorant to discretionary income. You don't need 100 millionaires. You only need like maybe 5 deca millionaires. That's what you need, and that's what you have. You have that. You have that in all hobbies now. So when you have people with that level of discretionary income, I think the average range is like it's like 1,500 a month or something like that. I think is according to data and your GMA and MBA textbooks. It's going to say something like 1,500 is your discretionary income average. But when you're looking at that, that's another variable people need to consider. I always try to introduce that into Pokemon because we have a younger audience. And again, it's not flexing. It's not like, oh, this guy's this or this guy's that. He's got money, whatever. He's balling. Clearly, you can tell by my home or whatever. I don't care about that crap. But at the end of the day, it's relevant in understanding why you have a meteoric rise with the truly rare, the truly powerful, the truly in demand, everything. Like the Charizards, the Illustrators, whatever. That's why you have the meteoric rises. Let's just remove Pokemon to end this video. Look at the Black Lotus. Went from 88,000 to 144 and then doubled again within 2 years. It's just because you're dealing with an item that is God tier rarity, God tier history, the best card in Magic, one of the most renowned trading cards in all of hobbies. I mean, this is just what it's going to do. Gretzky rookie, 90,000, sold again, 500,000. It's not some type of bubble activity. It's someone who can actually afford that card, and they're saying, this is what I'm going to pay because it's a piece of history. So there you go. That's what I have. Again, I don't think it's possible to truly sustain inorganic activity. In my experience, in my years, I've seen those pockets, but they always self-regulate and typically fast. They actually self-regulate faster today than they did in the Gold Star bubble. That's a good thing to probably end with, is that now when you see some inorganic activity, it really gets cut quickly. If anything, the silver lining of flippers and all of those flipping, all the splashing of the Poliwags is it really quickly delivers, and extinguishes that inorganic hype because there's so much market activity now. So there you go, guys. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you're still holding on and you don't believe it and you think it's all bubble. It's still the Pokemon Go bubble 3 or 4 years later. But that's what I have. That's my take. Hopefully it was useful. And that's pretty much it, guys. Till next time.